morning, everyone. This is Read, Right, and Wrong, an author chat show where we discuss everything we've read, what we're writing, and what's wrong with it all. Today, we're talking author to author. I'm today's host, Peter Fenton, and today I'm talking all things murder and true crime with our brand new member of the City Limits Publishing author team, Kristopher Landis, whose debut novel, Murder at Daybreak, was released on February 2nd. Kristopher, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is really cool. I used to do a soccer podcast, but I have not too often been on the interviewee side of things. So this is fun.
Nice. This is actually my first time doing one of these interviews. So,
Oh, cool. All right. Well,
so
if it gets awkward, we'll switch and we'll both be more
great,
comfortable. It'll be
great,
fun.
awesome. Love that attitude. So our first question today: tell us a little bit about yourself, Chris.
Well, I am from Columbus, Ohio. I grew up here, spent most of my life here. Married, have a young son getting ready to turn a year old in about a month and a half now.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you very much. I've been an avid reader all my life, started writing in high school probably after just, keeping all the stories in my head for years and years. I had a great teacher who told me I should actually try, writing them down for people. And I was like, well, okay, we can try that. Kind of worked different day jobs, kind of just bouncing around, but kind of quit those to be a stay-at-home dad / freelance writer when the little dude was born. So it's been a very interesting year having a baby right as a pandemic breaks out and quitting your job all at the same time. So
Yeah,
it
I
was
can imagine.
2020 was a year, we'll put it that way. But yeah, I'm a big soccer fan, big true crime fan, mystery fan. So all that kind of just came together at the right time.
Sure, absolutely. Now, Murder at Daybreak is set in Ohio, right?
It is, yes.
Is it based
Uh,
on where you grew up, or?
Not so much where I grew up. My grandfather lived in a very, very small town called Laurelville. Adelphi, actually, is the really, really tiny town. And I would go there to visit them growing up. And then my dad grew up in a slightly larger but still pretty small town called Circleville, which is known for the Pumpkin Show, which is the best fall festival in the universe. It is like the platonic ideal of a Midwest fall festival. I hope it comes back after this. I hope it comes back after this virus is gone because it's just the best. So in my head, I was just thinking kind of the archetypical Midwest small town. And actually, after I wrote the book this past summer, once it was already on its way to city limits, I went to visit my grandmother. My grandfather unfortunately has passed, but she still lives outside of Adelphi, and so she could meet the baby and everything. And we were driving through, and as a little kid, you don't remember details. You don't remember, you have little images here and there. And as we're driving through the countryside to get to Adelphi, I'm sitting here going, oh my God, we're driving through Daybreak. This is literally what I was picturing. So apparently that small town left a much bigger imprint on me than I even realized at the time.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, those images, they imprint on you and they stay with you whether or not you consciously think about them.
Yeah,
definitely. So let's transition into our first segment. So, of course, as implied by the title of this podcast, we've got 3 segments: read,
sure.
right, and wrong. So let's talk in our first segment, recent readings. Chris, tell me, what are you reading? What have you recently read?
Most recent book I finished was called Dead Sleep by Greg Eloy. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. It was the first book I read by him, but it was a fun little mystery about this photographer who has a missing twin sister. She sees a painting, and that's a series of these nude women who might be dead, might be alive, and she takes it to the FBI, and there's like a double twist ending that I didn't even see coming, and I usually see those coming. So the book was really fun, a fun little mystery. There were some points where I was like, losing me a little, but it brought me back. My only real complaint is that it was written like before 9/11 and before YouTube, and I'm like, oh, if this was modern, this would be even better. But that's the most recent book I finished. Right now, I'm reading V by Thomas Pynchon and The Poe something by Matthew Pearl. I literally just started that one. So
nice. How's it off to?
It's off to a fun start. I'm not usually a historical type guy. I
Sure.
did read The Alienist last year, so I'm getting a taste for kind of the period mysteries, which aren't usually my thing. But it's off to a fun start. I love anything that's like meta media, so like books about books or books about writers or movies about movies, things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And Murder at Daybreak is a book about a writer.
About writing, yeah,
Yeah.
little bit, yeah.
So, cool.
How about you? What are you reading?
Right now, right now I'm reading a book on how to market your book
Fun.
because,
Okay.
as a recently published author myself, I'm trying to figure out how to carve out that space where that is becoming a viable option for me career-wise.
You're telling me we have to market these things after we write them?
Unfortunately, yes.
Bro, I don't have time for this podcast. I'm way behind. I got it. No, I'm kidding.
You're a father. Yeah, I mean, having a publisher that does work for you is great.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
But the onus of, actually selling copies and finding your audience, the audiences that we have don't come from thin air, so we have to invest in being able to build our audiences.
Yes.
So that's what I'm currently reading. Yeah. I'm also reading. I do a periodic reread of the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, I think.
Don't think I've read that one actually.
Yeah, it's a good one. I think. My faith and beliefs have evolved a lot over time, but I do still find a lot of comfort in the writing of C.S. Lewis.
Awesome.
So yeah, the Screw Tape Letters. He sort of assumes the role of a demon as he's writing letters to an under demon.
Okay.
So it's like what C.S. Lewis's interpretation of how demons interact. Yeah. But it's it's fictionalized, sort of. Interesting. I don't know. It's interesting. So
I'll have to look that one up. That sounds up my alley.
Yeah. I read it for the first time in college, and every couple of years I just pick it back up.
Yeah.
It's a nice book. So
yeah, very nice.
Yeah, that's what I'm currently working on. So talking more specifically about the genre, what have been some of your favorite books on true crime and detective investigative journalism?
A big influence on what I was going for with the style of Murder at Daybreak was kind of twofold. The first was the advent of online true crime journalism, the kind of long form pieces from places like Vice, from places like not Vanity Fair, but like Stereo Gum, a lot of the kind of online long form journalism, because that in my head was what the main character Logan, that was his outlet. That was what he did. And I kind of tried to mirror that, but in book form. And the original idea for Murder at Daybreak is like really, really old in my mind. Like that wasn't even a thing back when I first kind of conceived the idea for Murder at Daybreak. In my head, this was going to be a series of short books. It was going to be a podcast for a while, So so it kind of evolved over time. But so the kind of long form online journalism, and then the kind of very personal true crime styles of like James Renner, who is a fantastic Ohio author who's actually been very instrumental in helping me do this book. And then like I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which was obviously swept the world a couple years ago, and then they caught the bastard. Oh, sorry, I probably shouldn't swear on this show. They caught the scumbag. You can put the dolphin noises over that one. So the kind of personal, firsthand, not sterile retelling of the case, because I mean I'll read whatever true crime. It's I'll read whatever, but I always felt more attached when the writer was attached, and I think that comes through. It makes an easier connection for people. So like the very first true crime book I ever got was actually a sequel called Zodiac Unmasked by Robert Graysmith. I didn't have any idea that there was a first Zodiac book. I didn't know anything about it. I got it at a newsstand by my house when I was like 12 or 13. And I just saw the cover and I was flipping through, and there were codes and there were mysterious letters. And oh my God, what is this? To a kid who loved Law and Order for this TV show for whatever reason. Yeah, I was a totally normal kid. This book was fascinating. And so I read it. And then years later, I find out, oh, that's a sequel. You should probably read this other one first. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that makes a lot more sense. So, that was the first one I read, and it really just kind of snowballed from there. I think James Renner's works on the Amy Mahalovic case, and then particularly his kind of semi-autobiography work that's also about the Maura Murray case called True Crime Addict. That one, as far as the voice of my book, I was really trying to consciously mirror that because I just felt that was the like platonic ideal of what I was going for.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Those sound like interesting books. I'm not much of a true crime reader myself. But Murder at Daybreak I really enjoyed. So
thank you for that.
That might be worth checking some of those books out. I enjoyed The Devil in the White City. Have you ever read that one?
Yes,
very good book.
It's behind me on the shelf somewhere here. Yeah, that was a really great one, and I think what that did really well was if you're going to do like a historical look at things, you've got to have like the focal point, and the fact that they had the kind of two dual narratives that kind of intersected and entwined, I think is really what made that book. Dude's a great writer. I've been meaning to reread that one actually, if my to-read list wasn't a mile long.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I definitely think with historical works, you definitely have to have a perspective. Mm-hmm. And I think The Devil in the White City really does build a perspective. Rather than let me tell you the story, because you're not going to capture the entire story.
No.
You just got to find the compelling perspective.
Yeah.
So I think that's what it does really well. And that's also something that Murder at Daybreak does really well. It's not historical per se, but it's like stepping back into time, into a simpler time.
Yeah. What my luck with the pandemic affecting my writing was real bad. I write this book that, takes place with some, seasoning of the kind of conservative liberal, dichotomy, which is a very real thing in rural Ohio. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of that is actually taken from my life, but, and then everything happens in the election and the aftermath, and that explodes. So now it seems like I danced around the issue. And oh, hey, there's this pandemic that's never mentioned once. When does this book actually take place? Right. And then to top it all off, the day I saw the first article online about the pandemic, so way back in the before times, that very morning, I had bought a book about pandemics and diseases and how they spread before I saw this article to start research for a post-pandemic apocalyptic detective story. And I read this article and then everything happens after. I'm like, well, can't write that. Everybody and their cousin's going to be doing that.
Yeah.
Now. Nobody wants that. So, and then I had a baby. So, my luck with the timing of the pandemic really put a crimp in the plans, man.
Yeah. COVID fic is not a genre I'm looking forward to.
That's the definition of hard pass for me.
Yeah. What about, so you've mentioned a few of your favorites and we discussed Devil in the White City a little bit, but can you think of any like truly underrated books that you want to plug? Anything our listeners should know about?
Like as far as true crime or?
Oh, anything.
Man. Boy, this is a non-visual. This is just audio, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking behind me at my bookshelf now because I have far too many books. William Gibson is an author that's been a big influence on me. A lot of people know him for Neuromancer. He was one of the founders of cyberpunk, which has obviously gone on to be a huge thing. He's one of the first people to coin the term cyberspace, all sorts of stuff. So his kind of more sci-fi work is what he's best known for, and rightfully so. He did a series of books in the early 2000s, but the first one of them is called Pattern Recognition, and it is one of my all-time favorite books. It is about, and I don't want to go into the plot too much because people really need to experience it for themselves, but basically there's this woman who has this innate sense, like this sixth sense of whether or not a logo design or a fashion design works. So she can always tell what's next. She's called a cool hunter. So she can tell you what the next big trend in fashion is going to be. And she's hired to find, she's hired to find the source of these mysterious videos that are being posted around the internet. And this is pre-YouTube. So it's like this it's like predicting the advent of YouTube and predicting the advent of alternate reality games, or the ascendancy of alternate reality games. There were some like I Heart Bees and stuff before that, but it's just this great not even detective story, but this mystery story, and great characters, and just one of my favorite books, and probably the best book by a famous author that they're not known for, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I have never heard of this story, so I'll definitely have to look it up. Sounds cool. All right, I think that just about covers reading.
Cool.
Let's transition into our next segment. So this is segment number 2, writing away.
Okay.
You have a new book that's just released. Tell us
Yes.
about it.
It is called Murder at Daybreak. It is a novel, fictional novel, obviously, in the style of a true crime book. I was going for, in my head, I was calling it fictional nonfiction, which totally doesn't make sense. But basically, I wanted it to seem as real as possible, but totally made up. Like I was saying earlier, in my head, I almost want one of the original ideas for it, or middle stage ideas for it, was to be a podcast, kind of like the true crime podcasts that are popular. But I'm a big fan of this series called Canis, which is kind of mystery, weird stuff podcast, but they do it as if it's real. And so, deep down in my little writer's soul, I would love it if I got an email saying, "Where's Daybreak? I want to visit it. I want to visit the diner," because then I would feel really good about, okay, I got it across. But so
Yeah.
Murder at Daybreak is a fictional nonfiction mystery in the style of true crime. Big city, New York City internet journalist Logan Jackson wrote the story of his life. Everything fell into place. It was this amazing story, picked up nationally. He got his golden ticket, and he's looking to cash it. He's got free reign to write about whatever he wants, guaranteed approval from his editor. Just find a story, make it work. And so he's searching, and somebody gives him this tip: hey, there was this crime in this small Ohio town that never got any national play. Nobody's written about it. Nobody really knows about it. Maybe you should check it out. So he goes to this podunk little town, and this town is like the definition of small, insular, tribal Ohio, rural Midwest town. They don't like outsiders here. Bill Hicks has an old joke about he was reading at a Waffle House, and a waitress walks up and goes, "What you reading for?" And so, I kind of pictured, not what are you reading? What are you reading for? So I kind of pictured it being a little like that. And he goes, and, people aren't too happy at first, but he makes, a connection with the local journalist, and he convinces them, they have one newspaper, one journalist in town. He convinces them, I'm not up to no good. I'm here to, I just want to see if I can get, this in front of people. And he ends up making a very important connection with the dead girl's best friend. The crime itself was a family, the Malone family, who were like the town royalty. So, the mom and the dad owned the biggest business. Mom ran PTA, every little thing a small town would need basically ran through these two people and their 18-year-old daughter, Eliza. Dad and Eliza are found dead. Mom missing, never found, no body, blood everywhere. It's horrific. And he meets Eliza's best friend, Victoria, and she believes in him. She believes in Logan immediately. They just have this connection, and obviously that goes on its own little side plot of the connection playing out. But through convincing this journalist he's not up to no good, and through this connection with Victoria, he starts to gain a little foothold in town, and he starts to dig into it. And I don't want to say too much and spoil the book, but this small town, like every small town, has a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Absolutely. Yeah. I read the book recently because I work on staff at City Limits Publishing. So I did get a chance to read it ahead of time. It is a very good mystery. I read it in 2 sittings.
Oh, wow.
Because it was that compelling.
Yeah.
So let's talk about inspiration. So, I mean, we talked a little bit about how driving through, you basically saw Daybreak as like imprints from your childhood, but where did this concept come from? Was there a real life story that inspired this piece specifically?
No, there was no real life crime it was based on or anything like that. There was a TV show that was on in 2001, and it was called Murder in Small Town X. It was a really ahead of its time. Like, it was at the first boom of reality shows. So Survivor had just started, Amazing Race was just starting, and the Fox network tried this really interesting thing where they set up this fake small town in Maine, I think it was, and they dropped 8 or 10 or however many real people into this town full of actors, and they had to solve this murder mystery. So it was like a murder mystery party, but in real life. And when people got eliminated from the game, they got killed by the killer. And it was 2001. I remember because the last episode aired the week after September 11th, and the person who won the game was a New York City firefighter who died. So they dedicated it to him. So
wow.
I remember very clearly. So 2001, I would have just been turning 13. And I just remember the idea of someone who's not a detective being plunked into this small town where this weird crime is happening. That stayed with me. And like I said, the idea went through so many iterations from the time I was 12 turning 13 till now. And it was always, that was kind of the seed of it. And then as I got a little older, I got real heavily into film. I thought I was going to do filmmaking. I saw Twin Peaks. David Lynch is a big influence. So there's, there's a big heavy dose of Twin Peaks seasoning in there, which hopefully wasn't too over the top. So, the image of someone who's not supposed to be there solving or going to look for and trying to solve this horrific, deeply personal to the town mystery, I think was kind of the kernel of the idea.
Yeah, I definitely got the Twin Peaks vibe.
I try not to be too direct with it, except for the one time where I mentioned Shelley, because I mean, who doesn't have a little bit of crush on Shelley? Let's be honest.
Right, of course. It actually, my introduction to Twin Peaks was the Psych episode that was devoted to Twin Peaks.
That. My wife and I are going through Psych. She had never really seen most of it, so we just watched that episode. And my wife hated Twin Peaks. She didn't finish it.
Yeah.
Yes, we stayed together. We got through that multiple time. But I'm just sitting there. I'm like trying to count and shout out the different references, and I give up halfway through the episode because there are just too many. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, yeah, well, But yeah, that's a great episode. Psych's a great show.
Psych is awesome.
Some of it didn't age particularly well, like Lassiter. Lassiter did not age very well in the current world environment, but everything else was pretty decent.
Yeah, this would play not well in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, Lassie talking about how he just wants to shoot something every other episode,
Yeah. Otherwise, great show. Yeah, and the Twin Peaks episode was fantastic.
Yes, and the Hitchcock episodes that came a little before that. The Hitchcock episode with Mr. Mr. Yin. Yeah, so good.
Awesome. Cool. So what aspect of the story that you've created really sticks out to you as something to watch for, or just something that really stands out?
I knew I would get stumped eventually in this interview, so you got there. I think that I tried really hard to make Daybreak itself, and it's kind of cliche to say the setting is a character, but for people especially who have lived in kind of a small insular town or a kind of cloistered sort of community, I tried to get that feeling really authentically, and I tried to reflect how the town felt about Logan and what he was doing as kind of an indicator whether or not he was on the right track.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I do think that the small town setting does particularly stand out. I do think the way that you wrote the relationship between Logan and Victoria and Logan and Orson, I think both of those are very compelling relationships that evolve over the course of the book. So that would be what I would say stands out the most.
You gave a much better answer than I did. I tried not to overthink before doing this because I didn't want to come off as like rehearsed or wooden, but sure. I did not think of that question like as a possibility at all. So you got me on that one. I honestly don't know how. Appreciate that. I don't know how good I am. I guess I'm okay at it, according to you, at writing relationships, because this is the first novel I've ever written. So it's kind of
really,
yeah.
What normally do you write?
Before Daybreak, I wrote a few screenplays when I was real young, and they're garbage, so no one's ever going to see those. I was writing primarily I covered our local soccer team here in Columbus, the Columbus Crew. I was covering them, doing a lot of stuff focused on the soccer culture and the fan community and things like that. But this was my first real work of fiction, and basically I started it in between clients at a couple of day jobs I had. I was just like, I've had this idea forever. I need something to kill the time. Let's see if I can do this. I've never tried to write a real long, well, I've never succeeded in writing a real long piece of fiction before. And, slowly and surely, 500 words here, 700 words there. On a good day, I would hit 1,000 or so, and just kind of banged it out at work in between calls. And then had to fix it all, but
of course
we got there. But so I didn't, I still don't really know how well I write things like relationships, because to me, all I kind of see is the idea and the story, and I worry a lot that I'm too plot focused. So it actually made me feel really good when you said that, because I honestly doubt my ability to write character and relationships a lot, because in my head it's all about the search and the mystery and the plot. So Thank you.
Well, good. I can say that you succeeded.
Thank you.
So what's next for you? Are you working on a second novel, another Logan story?
I have an idea for another Logan story, but I haven't started writing it, mostly because no one's going to want to read a second book if they don't like the first one. So I want to kind of make sure I don't invest another 100,000 words in something people don't like. I do have, honestly, I've suffered a lot from trying to start a bajillion things and not knowing what I want to do next. So I have several things anywhere from 5,000, 20,000 words written. And it's just a matter of what I want to write that day. I know it's getting down to the nitty gritty if I got to kind of stick with one idea, but I haven't been able to choose yet.
Yeah, it's tough, because when you release something that is brilliant, it took a while to get there.
Yeah.
But then once the project's done, you're like, okay, got to start my next one. But yeah,
you have all those other ideas in the meantime.
Yeah. Stories take time to really incubate in the mind to be ready to be written.
Yeah.
That's what I'm finding anyway.
Yeah. That's exactly it. I have no shortage of ideas. It's just a matter of, are these ideas ready to, do I understand them enough to really bring them to life the way they should? Because, I think honestly, the only reason I was able to finish Murder at Daybreak was because I had thought about it so much and known that's the core of the story, because obviously it evolves in the writing. You chop things off. There's a whole subplot that didn't make the final book for word count reasons. They evolve in writing, but if you don't know the kind of core heart of the story and you don't feel it, you're never going to bring it to life. So I'm working on stuff. It's just a matter of what am I going to finish. One of them is a more kind of literary fiction style story about a director's efforts to make a movie that his mentor in the 70s never got to finish. And the story's being told by the young woman filmmaker who's hired to do the behind the scenes stuff. And it turns out those efforts might be cursed. And who actually wrote this movie? It turns into a big kind of global search for information about this movie. There's another one that's kind of a William Gibson-esque thriller about this new religious movement that pops up during and after the pandemic. And why are people kind of disappearing and cutting off ties with their families, and so I got one of those going, and then I've got kind of a magical realism meets Bruce Springsteen thing going on that I've been working on the last few days. So
interesting. Bruce Springsteen goes on a magical adventure.
Not Bruce Springsteen himself. The kind of Americana punk, Americana rock, New Jersey, kind of spirit and vibe. And in the original iteration of that story, Tom Waits actually was a character, but I don't think I can get away with that in an actual novel. So it's kind of that feeling of the Americana rock, the New Jersey, the garages, the kind of dusty Midwest, sort of feeling, but set for a magical realism story.
Cool. Well, those all sound like really interesting ideas. I mean,
That's the problem. I like them
yeah,
all.
yeah. Well, I mean, see what the response to Murder at Daybreak
Right.
is,
Exactly.
and you know,
Go from there.
go from there.
If it bombs, change your name, write a totally different style of book.
Right, exactly. I actually think that's a good transition into our third and final segment, and all the wrongs. So let's
Okay.
get candid for a second.
Sure.
First, let's start with other writers and other books. Let's throw some shade. What's one book that you just could not get into that everyone else said that you had to read this, or you?
Um, Everyone said I had to read this. I don't have too many people in my life recommending me books because I just read so much. Everyone just kind of assumes I already know.
Sure.
I recently picked up on a whim at Half Price Books. I picked up The Night Circus, which I guess is a really popular kind of romance type
Yeah.
magical realism thing. And I got like 3 chapters in, and I was like, "This ain't for me, pal." It
Yeah.
wasn't bad. It was just it was done in like a mixture of third person present tense and first person present tense, and
Hmm.
nothing was happening. And I try not to like pre-read things online, but I kind of looked at some of the reviews and comments people were making, and basically it seems split into two camps: people who love the book for the description and how it's written, and people who are like, when does the story get good, when do things start? And I'm like, okay, I'm in that camp. So I sent it back to Half Price Books. I was like, we'll just try something else.
Sure.
There was a book that I was really disappointed in called Night Film, which seemed like it was written with my interests in mind, and
Hmm.
it was really interesting plot, really interesting things they did with some of the metatextual stuff. And I was like, I want to love this so bad, but the writing was cringeworthy.
Yeah.
And it broke my heart because I wanted so badly to love that book, and it just couldn't even finish it.
So if a book has night in its title, it's probably not going to be a good one. Is that what I'm taking away from this?
No, I've got to have a book that has night somewhere in here. There's got to be a. I'm looking at my shelves again, listeners. Boy, I'm not seeing anything off the top of my head here. Maybe
Yeah.
that's not a bad actually call out there. That could be true.
How do you feel about M. Night Shyamalan?
He's one trick pony. We all
Yeah.
experienced the Sixth Sense together, and then we all moved on. He's
Yeah. We saw what he
we
had.
we
I
came,
actually
we
read.
saw, we moved past it.
Yeah, I actually read The Night Circus in its entirety a couple years ago. It was fine. It was a
Like
book.
yeah, like you get what I'm saying though. If you're not
Yeah.
there for the prelude, the little one chapter where she's describing the circus, I'm like, okay, I can get into this. This is cool. But then nothing. It never went anywhere. I'm like,
Yeah.
are they trying like? I was like, I'd rather just watch The Prestige.
Right.
that
Yeah.
that was what the first 2 chapters gave me. And if that's your thing, awesome. I'm not trying to say it's a terrible book, no one should read it, because I'm sure there are lots of people who would love that. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah, I mean it's a bestseller for a reason.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought the descriptions were very good. It's been
Yeah.
a couple years since I actually picked it up. But I remember not hating it. But I didn't
It didn't
it,
stay with you, obviously.
yeah. When a mark of a good story is if it stays with you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like Gone Girl.
Yeah.
I still get chills when I think about that story.
Yes.
I thought that was a very good book, for example. Great. So let's talk about you as a writer. When have you gotten it wrong?
Boy, my wife would not have let me do this interview if she knew that there was going to be a chance for me to slam myself here. I don't think I'm that great, to be honest. Like even your compliments, I'm kind of like, oh well, I pretty much, I look at my writing and I just see a confluence of all my influences, and I'm like, oh yep, there I'm aping Neil Gaiman. Oh yep, there I'm aping William Gibson. Oh hey, I just lifted that from Twin Peaks. Cool, So in my head, I just look at my writing and I see all my influences, and I don't feel like there's a real voice. When I was doing soccer writing, I would, with the exception of 1 or 2 stories, I would say, I could have done so much better. I feel like sometimes, and I was talking about it earlier, I don't write characters and relationships well. Another thing I sometimes feel like is I kind of skirt the heart of whatever it is I'm doing, like especially with the soccer writing. I got right up against the core of the story, but I didn't dive deeper. So, hopefully I'm wrong about that when it comes to Murder at Daybreak. I hopefully I get to the heart of it and kind of make that connection. Um, Neil Gaiman did a master class that I watched and paid for and took, and he said that all great novels have that deeper idea that you've got to make that connection with. It doesn't have to necessarily be an obvious overt theme, but something that when a reader sits down to kind of digest, they go, oh yeah, that was what the author's trying to say. It reminds me of my favorite movie, 8.5 by Federico Fellini. The director Guido, he has this nightmare that he's not able to talk and direct, and some critic pops up and goes, you see, he has nothing to say. So I worry that I love the plots, I love the mystery, I love the search, I love, all the elements, but there's nothing deeper. So hopefully I'm wrong about that. But that's kind of my deep dark fear. And are you charging me by the hour for this therapy session, or
No.
what are we doing here?
I mean, I appreciate you being vulnerable like this. I think a lot of writers, whether or not we're willing to admit it, do suffer from that fear of it's imposter syndrome,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. That's exactly what it is. Yep.
Just thinking that, oh well, all these people have shaped me along the way.
Yeah.
So what is really original about my work?
Yeah.
And I think over time we develop our voices.
Yeah.
Right.
That's my hope.
And so, yeah, what we start off might be more derivative.
Yeah.
But it's how we get started and how we grow and evolve.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that gets published is probably good.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what the general public thinks, I guess. Oh. But I would like to think so. Finding, and I don't know if you know this or not, but I got picked up by City Limits through Pitman on Twitter.
So did I.
Okay, so the soul crushing, like the watching all these, and sorry, hashtag writing community here if you're listening to this, but there are a ton of terrible pitches out there. Yeah. And you see them getting these retweets and getting agent likes, and you're just like, they didn't even spell that word right. What are you doing? And so, imposter syndrome, you're sitting here with this manuscript that you worked so hard on, and it's like, why am I doing this? You go to a bookstore and you see 37 different iterations of my wife's a cheating B word, and they're selling copies out left, right, and center. And even though that's not what I write, it's like, maybe that's what I should be writing, because you want it. Yeah, it's just hard.
Yeah, no, it is. And the sort of thing that I like to think about with that is like, it's not about the number of offers you get. It's that the right opportunity comes. Yes. And the right place to have your voice projected is where people will hear it.
Yeah. And that's definitely the instance with me in City Limits. This was going to be my last pit map, the one that I got picked up on. I was like, all right, if this doesn't, I'm not going to query it anymore. I'm going to shelf it, because everyone says your first novel is terrible. Don't try to sell your first novel. Don't, unless you've rewritten it 6 times, which I haven't. Just put it on the shelf, go write the next thing, and maybe that'll get published. So it had been 3 or 4, and 3, I think, Pitmans, and I had gotten a couple of interests from vanity publishers, or
sure.
never hear back from agents, and it was pretty defeating. And I was starting to get in my head a little and listen to the not so wise wisdom of the crowds who like to say, well, just put it aside, your first novel's not going to be any good anyway. Maybe it's not. I'd like to think it's going to be the worst of my novels, but I was
one would hope.
I was like, all right, I'm going to do this last one, and if nothing comes of it, then we'll move on to the next thing. So you're absolutely right. The right situation at the right time is vital.
Yeah. What has the response been so far to Murder at Daybreak? I mean, you've heard me keep praise on it.
Yes.
But what have your like beta readers or early reviewers, what have they had to say?
This is the part where people are gonna like clutch their pearls at me. I didn't have beta readers.
Mhm.
I just kind of wrote it, and I once it was done, I showed it to a couple of friends, and they liked it. So only two or three people have read it. Four, I guess, three or four counting you. Um,
Yeah.
but but people liked it, but I didn't. First of all, I wasn't involved in the air quotes writing community on Twitter or anything like that at the time. I didn't really get into that till after I wrote the thing and I was trying to figure out how to publish it. So the kind of prevalent wisdom of you've got to do 8 or 9 drafts of it, you've got to do copious rewrites, you've got to have beta readers to give you feedback as you're writing it. I didn't do any of that, and a lot of that doesn't make sense to me. Like,
Mhm.
if you're like, well, the book doesn't actually count until you're on your third draft, then you really know the story, dude. You're writing the wrong story. If if
Yeah.
if if you if your low key bragging flex is how many times you've rewritten it to get it almost ready to send out, I think you just like writing that story, and that's awesome. You go do you, but don't tell other people what they should be doing.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, that
and
resonates.
and
Um,
and and the beta readers thing, like in my head, I don't want people to see it until it's done. Like, I
sure.
can't imagine showing someone the first third of I'm not going to say I almost said Citizen Kane. I'm like, that is not the connection I want to make. I'm not going to go out there and call Murder at Daybreak Citizen Kane. I wouldn't want to show someone the first third or of a movie I made, or like show someone 10 minutes of a movie
Mm.
at a time. So, I think one of my coworkers, as I was writing it, she found out I was writing it, so I kind of sent it to her as I was going, mostly because she badgered me inherently until I gave in. But there was no, like, it was a one-way street. I wasn't asking for feedback. I wasn't asking, did this work?
Mhm.
Because beta readers, I'm sure, work for a lot of writers. Obviously they do. There's not,
Yeah.
if that's your process, that's fine. But I've always been kind of a control freak, kind of a very insular, I don't talk about what I'm writing as I'm writing it until it's done or mostly done. Like, as much as
Yeah.
I told you earlier is as much as I've told people, like even my wife, about what I'm writing. So it's it's just not my thing.
Sure. I mean, every writer's process is different.
Yeah.
What works for some people obviously won't work for everyone else. Yeah, I mean, I my book that's coming out end of March, that was only draft 4 that's getting published. You know,
Yeah.
there weren't there weren't all these crazy rewrites. How many drafts did you end up with for Murder at Daybreak?
I wrote the draft in between calls at work.
Hmm.
And then once it was done, I let it sit for 2 weeks, and I kind of went through and read it and read it, not read it, the website, and read it afterwards and made corrections. And there was a little bit of editing done after that, but I didn't sit down and rewrite it or anything like that. What's being published is pretty much probably 75% what I wrote that first sit through.
Wow, that's incredible. Way to go. Well, Chris, it has been wonderful talking with you.
Yeah, this has been
Wonderful
great.
getting to know you too. I mean, this is the first time we're speaking.
I call dibs on interviewing you when your book comes out. Tell Robert that I'm calling dibs on that right now.
Okay. Abandon all hope coming out March 30th.
There you go.
Um, yeah, it's just been a pleasure. I'm so excited to see your book released, and I can't wait for everyone else in the world to read it. You can get Murder at Daybreak today everywhere books are sold. We're actually recording this the day before your
Yes.
release day. Are you excited?
Yes, excited, a little bit terrified. I still actually I haven't got my physical copy yet because of the postal service.
Hmm.
So I haven't got to hold it in my hands yet. So it doesn't quite feel real. I fully expect once I hold it in my hands, I'm both going to be like, oh, this is awesome, and oh my God, what is happening?
Yeah.
But it's very exciting. I'm very excited for everyone to get to see it. My mom hasn't got to read it yet, but
Yeah.
she's over the moon excited. She's tweeted about it nonstop because someone decided my mom could have a Twitter. I was not consulted.
Way to go,
Um,
Mom.
um, so yeah, I'm very excited. My wife hasn't read the book.
Really?
Yeah, she's having the baby and everything.
Hmm.
Neither one of us has much time to read, and she's always go go go. She can't sit still, and I love her to death for it. She keeps me going. But so she's finally going to get to read it. So it's a very exciting time, and also just a shade on the side of terrifying.
Understandable. I know when you get your author copies, it's overwhelming. I mean, I'm not even that emotional of a person, but I cried when I held my first author copies. So I'm very excited for you to receive those.
Thank you.
Chris, thank you so much. Any parting words, final thoughts for our listeners?
Um, just thank you everyone for your interest, for supporting, small press and indie writers. And I do want to say that keep throwing your work out there with Pit Mad. If you're a writer and you're starting to feel defeated, like I was, just keep doing it. If you believe in your work, you don't even have to believe in yourself. Like I have so much self-doubt, it's crazy. I mean, you listen to this podcast, so you know that by now. If you believe in your work, don't stop putting it out there, because make the work what matters. Don't focus on yourself and whether or not you're good enough. If you know your work is good enough, then put it out there. And just thanks to everyone for supporting me, supporting City Limits, and small and indie presses.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Thank you all for listening today. I'm Peter Fenton, and this is Read, Right, and Wrong.